Do you think Raskolnikov's desire for power is a social construction? Because generally speaking, as soon as a child comes to this world, the idea of power has been deeply embedded into its mind. I mean, the moment a child shows up in this world, the idea that you got to be powerful, you have to be powerful, are the constant ideas that are deeply embedded into the child's mind. Ironically speaking, I think Raskolnikov thinks he wishes to be a powerful man. But my question is, do you think the society itself has planted the very idea?
My take on this question would be, we need to examine whether the ambition of Raskolnikov is acceptable. Is it morally acceptable, valid? That's the first question. The entire fiction of Dostoevsky deals with the question of will as against the older notions of the divine will and then the dependence on a transcendental deity. The emphasis in Dostoevsky, who in my view is a very modern writer despite his conservative beliefs in many areas. Now, he believes in human will, all right. And he believes that the human being should exercise the willpower that is given to him, and it is in existentialist terms being condemned to be free to choose. But then that is not the end of the discussion or the debate, because the primary question is, you are free, you are exercising your freedom, you are exercising your free will, but for what? I mean, he has constructed this idea of Superman. Porphyry, the detective, pointedly asks him questions about an article he had written earlier, where again he had defended the right of a small minority not to bother about the social conventions of morality and not even bother about the legal, prohibitions. And that, I think, leads Porphyry to identifying him as the criminal. But coming back to the question that you raised, could we say that if society had not, as you say, broken him down or pressured him into giving up his will, he would have been happy? I don't think so, because the very ambition has something very inhuman about it. And I think the novel is a critique of that, because it is related to this question of where does your freedom begin? Are there existing ethical notions against which you cannot go when you are exercising your freedom? So maybe if you relate it to a novel like Demons or The Possessed, which is a political novel, the question raised again is the same, in the sense you have to accept the opportunity you have as a human being to exercise your will, but there are constraints. And the question is, what are the consequences of your use of free will? So Raskolnikov's suffering has to be seen from the other point which you were mentioning in your question. Should we say that he fails after constructing a very ambitious praxis or plan of action? If you go on the superficialities of the narrative, yes, immediately after the moment of killing that old woman, and then minutes later killing that very innocent woman who is an assistant there, he begins to suffer, and all that confidence he had that the select minority need not have any conscience and they need not suffer for what they have done, he begins to. He enters into so many episodes of delirium, and he keeps, very carelessly talking to himself aloud and giving hints and clues openly to everybody. So, should we take it as the ambitious man's failure because of the pressure of the society, or should we take it as something that should have happened and therefore it's good that it happened, in the sense he learns to, he begins to learn at least that the question should be a more preliminary, primary question: what do I use my freedom for? And I think I would like to relate it to not only contemporary politics, contemporary to Dostoevsky, but to the later events in our world history. We have seen again and again political leaders assuming that because of an ideological belief they have, or because of some utopian plan they have of immediately changing the human world, they also begin to think that they have the sanction and the permission to perpetrate the most inhuman kind of violence. Haven't we witnessed that during fascism, during the authoritarian regimes? It has been a whole age of ideological violence. It has, when we read Brothers Karamazov, at least the father, his cruelty and his despicable behavior has roots in his sensuality. And you don't even have that defense for the others, you see, because it's more or less like philosophical and based on an ideology. That I think needs to be remembered. I would say Dostoevsky, with a very great foresight, was wondering about the possible consequences if more and more intellectuals, more and more leaders of society begin to believe that they are not bound by ordinary everyday morality, and they believe programmatically that violence can be justified if it is only a means towards a greater end, you know. That's exactly what Raskolnikov also tells himself. If I kill this one woman, hundreds of poor students will be saved. Is that a justification? These are the questions which I think ultimately establish the importance of Dostoevsky as a writer. His narratives resonate with the experiences of the 20th and now I would say our century also, where ideological violence seems to stem from the arrogant belief that you have the right to change the human world and you have a blueprint for how it should be done. If you look at it from a perspective, I think you are right, because as Foucault and many other thinkers have established, the nature of power is very distinctive in the modern societies. Modern would include naturally 19th century Russia too, because it was going through a huge turmoil with the problem of Europeanization and the modernity which was chosen by a very small elite class in Russian society, etc., etc. We can take it up later. But coming back to the point that you are making here, the power in the societies is all pervasive, and it begins, as you were hinting, at home, as Althusser would say, the family, the school and the church. These are all ideological apparatuses of power. The whole question is of power, and more specifically in the case of this novel, Raskolnikov, his search for power, I think it emanates from the conditions to which he has been pushed. He is a former law student living in some kind of an ugly hole, not even a room in Petersburg, not able to find 2 square meals a day, and then also burdened with the guilt that his family is constantly, including his sister, is making wrong choices many times just in order to support him. So, out of this situation of sheer helplessness and humiliation, I think emerges his search for power. And the one power naturally that is available to him is the so-called intellectual power, right, of making, as you said, a construction. And the societies have various kinds of constructions, constructing nature of power on the one hand, and also constructing a model for how to deconstruct that power and also how to keep that under check and control and monitoring, right? That's how I could attempt to answer your question.